What's up, everyone? Back again for another episode of One and Done here with Zeke.
Yo.
All right, let's get this thing started. So today, let's do a little bit of a comparison discussion. We'll take some of the iconic cards from all the major card games and just talk about each one.
Yeah.
So we'll go with the Black Lotus, which everyone knows is from Magic. The original first edition Charizard from Pokemon. And the Blue Eyes from Yu-Gi-Oh, and of course the Awakened Power from DBS. So how do you want to break this down?
So let's compare desirability. Clearly, in each hobby, Charizard, Blue Eyes, and Black Lotus are like the most desirable, the most generically popular, and categorized as the face of the card game. Like when you think of the most valuable, most collectible thing in each card game, you think of Blue Eyes, you think of Black Lotus, you think of Charizard. Like Charizard above everything else. And like personal opinion set aside, like I think it's interesting because I don't like any of those cards. like to me, Magic Time Walk is my favorite card. It's part of the Power 9. It's an alpha. Like it way better than Black Lotus. Pokemon Gold Star Umbreon is like my favorite, like most collectible card in my opinion. And then in Yu-Gi-Oh, definitely not Blue Eyes. I like so many other things. So it's funny. I'm like that weird black sheep, but I recognize though being that.
Well,
black
then I guess that makes me the regular sheep because I actually love, for every card game that you just mentioned, my favorite card is actually the iconic card, and I don't know if that's just me following the crowd or if that's just me. Generally liking it. It could be a psychological analysis for another episode, but I do definitely feel like those are my favorites for each card game.
Oh yeah, no, and I think.
But what about Awakened Power? You didn't get to that one. Do you feel like that's your favorite for DBS or?
I think I say the Black Goat in DBS, but the thing about DBS that's unique to DBS, unlike the other three are part of the original first set. But with Dragon Ball, it's like 4 sets later, and I think that's what makes Dragon Ball kind of cool is that generally to the majority of the community, we all recognize at this time that Awakened Power is the icon card of Dragon Ball. Like it's the general, it's the Charizard, it's the Black Lotus, it's the Blue Eyes.
So there's another difference too. The other 3 major players haven't had multiple iterations, whereas with Dragon Ball, another thing that's unique is that this DBS card game isn't the original / first card game for the Dragon Ball franchise.
Correct.
So I don't really know if at this point you could say that the Awakened Power has ascended so much that it's actually become the face of all Dragon Ball card games. I don't know if it's there yet, but definitely it is also unique in that sense.
Right, because like in the old Dragon Ball, the original Score Z, it's the icon card.
SS3, yeah.
Yeah, the SS3. I always call it the scratch rare because it has like the foiling. It looks like a bunch of scratches, which is like. But I think it's basically the equivalent of a secret. But unlike our secrets nowadays that are ratioed, theirs were completely random. Like.
Well, there's not even called secrets. It was called ultra rares back then, right? Like the rarity for that card. I had heard ultra rares were 2 to 3 per case.
Yeah, and the thing is, you could pull, I believe, an ultra rare version of. So from what I understand, and this is digging back like so many years. There was ultra rare version of cards, and then there was unique cards that only came ultra version. And it was weird because so certain cards got ultra. They came in like a regular common, uncommon, rare form, but then there was like the ultra rare variation of that card, and then there were cards that only came ultra rare, and those were just like ridiculously hard to get. Like, and that's the thing. Like there was multiple ultra rares, and like I said, some of them were like just reiterations of other cards. So
interesting. So it's not like Dragon Ball Super where you only have like 2 or 3 secrets in a set. Potentially with that approach, you could have a lot more ultra rares in a set, so it becomes even harder to pull then.
Because it's already pre-seeded to like, or it's pre-ratioed, not even seeded to already have 2 to 3, and you could buy like 5 cases and not get the ultra rare.
But your pool is so much larger of ultra rares that the chances of pulling a specific one becomes much harder then, right? Because like at least with Dragon Ball Super, it's still that same 2 to 3 per case, but I don't actually think there's been a 3 per case, but for sure 2 per case. But because you only have like, let's say 3 in the total population of different types of secrets, it's not as hard to try and aim for the one that you specifically want. Whereas like with Dragon Ball Score, if you really wanted that SS3, but you're like trying to like not get the other like 30 other ultra rares, and you're only given like 2 or 3 per case, yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, and so this is the weird thing is that the Dragon Ball card game that we have right now is such an anomaly. There's so many things that it does not follow the trend of regular card games. And like the icon, like just in collectability, the icon card is not in the base set. There's actually near nothing collectible in the base set, with the exclusion of the SPRs, the special rare cards. That was a Goku card, a Hit, Broly, and and a Frieza. Those were the 4 special rares. And you were guaranteed.
I don't know, man. I actually really like the original Senzu Bean. Obviously, it's a common and it's not foiled, but I do like the original Senzu Bean art.
It's cool. I mean, it's simple.
Yeah, it just has that nostalgic feel to it.
Yeah, Goku being Goku. But I think it's really interesting because those cards are worth like, they're all less than like $20. Like some of them are like $7-8.
Pretty much. I mean, you know this much more than I do, but from like a scarcity perspective, there was actually a lot of set 1 printed, right? So
kind of. I mean, it's such a hard thing to really like calculate without like knowing the actual numbers.
Well, for sure, multiple waves though, right? Like it wasn't a one.
Oh yeah, yeah, and that's kind of another thing. Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh, and so this is the one thing that the Icons cards all have in common. They all come from a single wave print run. That's the one thing all of the Icon cards have in common. Alpha Black Lotus only comes from the Alpha print run, which is the Wave 1. Wave 2 was Beta, different card. Wave 3 was Unlimited, different card. Charizard comes first edition, and then that was the Wave 1. Everything after that was not first edition. Same thing with Yu-Gi-Oh. You have Wave 1, which was first ed, and then Blue Eyes, and then everything.
Right.
So that's the one thing that all of the Icon cards have in common, is that they're one and done print runs. Which is kind of, it's funny because me and Mike came from Dragon Ball primarily, and we've always talked about the one. This is kind of what inspired the name, was one and done. It's just all of the.
Well, but you make a great point though. It never crossed my mind that the other ones were also one and dones. It's an interesting correlation that they all have.
So and idealistically, the most iconic things in the card universe, Pokemon, TCGs, CCGs, sports, they're one and done print runs. The most iconic things, like in sports, there's a lot of iconic things, but the one thing they all have in common is that they're printed one time.
Yeah, you wonder if like it's knowing that it's a one and done that generates that like attention and hype for trying to go after certain cards, or it just so happens that all of these card games that had these iconic cards happen to just be in that one and done set. And if like, let's say the Alpha Lotus wasn't printed in a one and done set, that it would still have that same kind of desirability. Or if the first edition Charizard wasn't a one and done, or hell, even the Awakened Power, if Tournament of Power wasn't a one and done, like let's say they had multiple waves of it, do you think that would still have created the kind of...
No, I have a strong feeling that being...
But see, if the answer is no, then that would imply a card being iconic has nothing to do with the art, right? It has to do with the scarcity and difficulty of getting it.
I think it has to do with a combination of things, a large combination of factors. Where I don't think art is a huge affliction.
Oh man, really? So you don't feel like the Lotus, part of the appeal of the Lotus is the art itself, not just what it brought to the deck.
So let me ask you this. Dragon Ball has Goku shooting a Kamehameha in godlike form. Beautiful art. Pokemon has a fucking dragon that breathes fire. Yu-Gi-Oh has a fucking dragon that shoots light. And then you have a fucking flower.
But it's not just about a flower. It's the art of that flower and everything that went into that design. I think.
But I think Magic is unique because I've had this conversation with you where Blue Eyes was not that good when it first. Cause I played card games back then, which, man, I feel old. I didn't play. I wasn't there when Magic was there, but I was there with Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh. And now and Dragon Ball at the time, and I've been there for all of them. And I'm gonna tell you right now, Charizard was playable. It was good. Part of the reason why it was expensive was also because it was a good playable card, but it wasn't the best card. It wasn't the best.
Well, even before the card game had started, Charizard was already the most popular Pokemon character, though, right? So part of it could have also been like the existing popularity of the character just took the card to a whole nother level too.
Right.
I mean, I have to believe that has something to do with it too. But you also have to admit, like, if you put all of the hollows from the first edition together, Charizard's the only one that's actually doing something. The other ones aren't even like cool looking that much because they're just standing there. Charizard's actually in his like typical Charizard position, blowing fire out. Amazing art. I don't know. I feel like art definitely has to play a role. I cannot just be the scarcity.
So art plays a factor. You can't have one without the other. I'll give you that. But what I'm saying is, like, Black Lotus was recognized as the best card ever.
Correct. Correct.
Like in terms of playability, like it was literally, to this day it's still considered like the most playable card in like the game's history, and we're like 25 years later.
But you have to isn't there a time where playability no longer is what's driving prices, but it's the other factors, right? Like even with the Lotus, I would say the meta of it probably is what drove the early day prices. But today, if you ask anyone that's actually trying to buy a Lotus, they're not going to tell you I'm buying it because of how good of a card it is. They're going to tell you I'm buying it because it's an amazing looking card. It's the face of Magic. I mean, unless do you disagree? Like for how long does meta drive prices until it just finally makes a turning point and it's no longer the meta that's driving, it's other factors?
So Magic is unique because meta drives price strictly.
Right, but do you think that would still be like in today's time, like 2020?
100%.
So more than 20 years ago, you still believe that it's the meta that's driving the Lotus prices?
No. Lotus is just the best card from the meta of that era, and again, I feel like Lotus is unique, similar how TOP with Awakened Power Son Goku. TOP was the set it came out of. With the Awakened Power Son Goku, what makes it unique is the fact that it's not the first set. It's like the fourth, fifth set in the game. It came out a year after the game started. Black Lotus, what makes Black Lotus unique is the fact that nothing makes Black Lotus unique in the set that it's in. It's actually part of a group called the Power 9. There's nothing that makes it unique like it does in the other games. Like Awakened Power is the secret rare of the set. Charizard is one of the super rares in the set. Blue Eyes is one of the ultra rares in its set. Like it has something that makes it even more unique. Whereas Lotus was just a rare, one of I think 30 something rares, and Lotus was made iconic because it was just the best card of its time. It was the best card, and being the best card, it became a memory of when you think of the original Magic when it came out. The most iconic thing about it was Lotus, because Lotus was in every deck. Versus with Pokemon, you have the TV show driving it. With Yu-Gi-Oh, you had the TV show. Like the two most iconic things in Yu-Gi-Oh is Blue Eyes and Dark Magician. That's it. That's
what about the actual character?
Yugi's not even a card. That's the thing.
Oh, really? They never even made a card out of the guy?
Nope.
Oh, that's messed up.
Well, that's what I'm saying though. they focused around the monsters, and the most iconic thing about the show
Right.
was Blue Eyes and Dark Magician.
And same with Dragon Ball. Goku was definitely the most recognized character.
Charizard was one of the most popular base set Pokemon from set one. Like it has its out of the 3 starters that came to the United States, it was just Blastoise and Charizard. Venusaur got canned.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, Japanese got green and red. America got blue and red. So obviously Charizard was always the favorite before even the card game came to exist. Charizard was just the popular.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like with Dragon Ball, is the same thing. Goku was always the main face of Dragon Ball 2 before the card game, so that probably helped drive like the original SS3 interest, the Awakened Power. I mean, definitely had, and you can kind of tell like some of the bias that Bandai gives to the cards, right? Like the cards that have Goku on it tend to be the ones that are more powerful, or the ones that have more fancy art on it. Like there's a lot of things that you could see kind of bias, and same with like, Pokemon, you see kind of like that, bias towards making the Charizard card look cooler than the other Pokemon. So I think that definitely does drive it as well. Magic's the only kind of like oddball out of all of them, because it never really came from a TV show. So it's a little bit different.
So and I think, that plays a huge factor in a lot of things. I'm personally like at that point where like it comes down to recognize like the best cards, the best deck in Pokemon was Haymaker, or I called it Jungle Beat, but but it was Haymaker. Haymaker was like literally like the best deck, and it literally played Hitmonchan, Electabuzz, and Scyther. It's literally like, it's really funny because the deck is like so not in terms of icon. And that's what I think is important. Each icon card has a funny story behind it. Magic, it's iconic because it's the best card ever. Like that's what made it iconic back then. And then over time, it's just grown into that idol of icon. So Black Lotus was never an icon out the door. Black Lotus became an icon over just a couple years, and then over 2 decades has become now like the face of Magic. Yu-Gi-Oh, same thing. But it's different though because it comes from a show. Blue Eyes was never meta popular in the original. It was all about beat down, and then GOAT format. Like Blue Eyes.
Part of it you could kind of like blame the card designers, right? Because they were the ones that made the Blue Eyes White Dragon, the Ultra Rare, the hard card to pull. Like if they had just made that guy a common card, it might have not had the same results.
Right. And as I'm saying, there's a lot of factors that go into it. Rarity plays a factor, art plays a factor, but I think the one thing that they all have in common is they all come from places that are one and done.
Yeah, they're very limited in print.
The one thing that they all have in common is that they're one-wave print runs. And that is the key thing about icon cards. It is that one of the criteria, the must-have criteria to be iconic or to be hyper collectible, is that there's only one time you can get it naturally. And that goes for everything, like literally everything. Look at placers. You only have one window to get a placer card in Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, Dragon Ball. You only have one window to naturally obtain it, and that's by competing and winning it. Anytime outside of that window that year, you have to pay a premium from a reseller. Boom. That is like the number one criteria to become a highly collectible card. Or like to be considered the top tier of collectability, you have to be a one and done. Because every single thing that's highly collectible in the card game, in the card world, every collectible card, sports, card games, CCGs, anything you can think of, the thing that makes the things that are at the top of the list, the top of the mountain, they're all things that you only have one window of opportunity to naturally obtain them. You had to be there to buy first edition base set. You had to be there to buy first edition Yu-Gi-Oh. Yeah, you had to be there to buy first edition or Alpha Magic. You had to be there to buy TOP. To buy anything after that, you're always paying a premium just to buy it, just because you've missed your window, and I think that goes hand in hand with everything, and there's other things that make things iconic, obviously, but I think like the number one base rule is it has to be a single print run.
Well, let's do this. I was having a very interesting discussion with a good friend of mine, and thought it might be fun to bring this into our episode. So he asked me an interesting question, and I want to get your take on this, and then I'll share my take on it. Would you rather invest in, let's say, 3 basic 10 victory strikes? Basic 10 means it's a gold 10 with 1 9.5 subgrade. Or would you rather invest in a PSA 9 first edition Charizard? It's not an easy answer, but I thought it might be fun to discuss it. So
it depends on so many factors. But the first thing I'll say is that neither are a bad option. I would say in terms of safe, the Charizard is the safer investment, but in terms of reward, the Awakened Power Sun Goku might be more rewarding. And I think it comes down to 2 things. A, which one do you like better? Period. Flat out. Money set aside, scarcity set aside. Which one do you like to look at better? That's like number 1. And number 2, do you plan on reselling it, or do you just want to own something valuable? And you're, you know, and that's the thing. Like when you're investing and collecting, I think there's, like with you and I, we obviously want to invest and buy and collect things that are valuable. Like one of the criteria for us, at least, to collect, it has to be valuable. I don't want to collect something that's common or worth very little. Like,
I don't know, man. Those stacks of Bulmas, those are pretty cool.
Waste of time and money. Like I told you, like one of the reasons why I stopped, for example, like Dragon Ball has Judge promos. One of the reasons why I stopped collecting Judge promos is because they became oversaturated. They became inexpensive. Championship promos, they used to be expensive. Now they're like dirt cheap. Like they're literally less than $1. Like to me, that's why
for sure. Yeah,
you know, for me, like value is definitely a high criteria.
Well, that's why I specifically used the word invest. I didn't ask, would you rather collect 3 gold black label, 3 gold label victory strikes, or 1 first edition Charizard. I used the word invest because this was mostly meant not necessarily to like buy it to sell it, but owning something. And, you know, obviously it's a lot of money that you're spending on either option, knowing that over the long term that the value in it has grown. Because one of the things that Dragon Ball suffers from is that some of the cards that they come out with originally start at these really high prices, but then over time start to go down. So the question, it really is meant for investing, not because you want to just sell it right away, but you want to have your money put into something that you know over the long run has a really, really good return. And so comparing those 2 options, which, you know, financially they come out to very similar numbers, but which of the 2 would you rather go after, knowing that you're trying to make sure that the value of them in the long run is good?
I would stick to my original 2. A, which one do you like to look at more? That comes down to. And B, you know, are you if you're looking to resell, and not in the terms like you said, I know that's not the intention, but it just comes down to like Charizard is safe. You can buy it at today's price, and you know 5 years down the line it'll be worth more. Will it be worth a lot more? I don't think so. It may be worth $1,000 more, maybe 2. You know, a 9 goes for what, like 5 to 10,000?
Yeah, I mean, it used to be around 5,000. Lately, it's gone up. I think it could partly be supply. It could be more demand lately. But now it seems to be around the 6,000 to 7,000 range. So it's kind of creeped up a little bit. Hasn't hit 10K at all. For
Right.
strictly talking PSA 9. I mean, unless it's an insanely strong PSA 9, I don't think I've ever seen anything that high sell.
Right.
For it.
So value wise, they're worth both about the same. Cause
yeah. So value wise, we're talking about very similar numbers. With
I feel like in terms of investing, if money isn't an issue, but you kind of want to have some fun with it. Like personally, the Awakened Power looks way better than Charizard, but that's just me. People will argue iconicness all day, and I would just say it's boring. I mean Charizard, again, I'm not a big Charizard fan, so my personal take is invest in the Goku, because at the end of the day, I don't think the Beckett 10 Gokus, like the gold 10s, are going to really drop under a certain point. I think right now their estimated value is between 1,800 to 2,500. That's like their estimated value based on the ones that have sold between, you know, the time that the card's been out to now. Like their estimated value is roughly that range right there. So happy medium would be 2,000. And then, you know, you can maybe get it for a little bit cheaper or get it for a little bit more, you know. Like the happy medium is 2,000. So you're buying 3, which is $6,000. I mean, currently right now the card is worth, Victory Strike bottomed out at $70 raw. And I know that 6 months later it was worth like 200 to 300, or not even 200. It was worth like, sorry, it was worth like 150. And then the Beckett 10 started to roll in, and they started like at about 1,000 to 1,500, roughly like 6 months into it. So I would say that the growth is ridiculous. Like you're looking at like a 2,000% growth in 6 months between, you know, from raw to graded and then plus natural growth. It's just ridiculous. So the Victory Strike has had really good growth, but it hasn't plateaued. Only time will tell. I mean, the card's only getting harder and harder to find raw because players are either playing with it or people are just getting it graded to get it away from players' hands. So I mean, between the two, this is how we look at it. You want a safe bet, put on the Charizard. You want a lucrative bet, invest in the Gokus. I personally would invest in the Gokus because you might be the one who discovers fire first. And what I mean by that is that you're touching something that has the potential to be a Charizard, and you're already starting in the 10s. And I think the pop report for Beckett 10s is like what, 20, right? 18?
I think last I checked it was 22 or 23. I can't remember, but definitely like much lower than the Charizard.
Right. So and the thing is, like with the Victory Strike, there's only one thing above that, and that's the black label, and there's only one in existence. So versus with the Charizard, you have a plethora of PSA 10s in existence. You know, doesn't mean that they're for sale. They're just in existence, and those at the end of the day are going to be worth the most. And I feel that finding another black label Victory Strike will Awakened Power will just never be a thing. I really don't think.
Well, let's keep it at just the golds because that was the original intent. But I do think it sounds like your answer to this is you would go for the Gokus.
Well, no, but the reason why I bring up the black label is because you look at the Charizard. There's way more competition in something that's the same thing but better, versus with the Beckett 10s. There's not a lot. It's closer to the top of the mountain. With Charizard, you have PSA 10 and then the two Beckett 10s that Gary owns that will never. And then you have Beckett 9.5s that are autographed and that are worth. So that's what I'm saying. Charizard has that PSA 9 Charizard has a lot to compete with in itself. Versus the Awakened Power, you're already at the top. There's only one thing above you, and it's a one of one, and it's probably never going to see the market ever again. So you already own the top. So basically, just like with Gary's, you don't count the gold 10s in the conversation of value because we know Gary will never sell his 2 gold 10 Charizards. But we know that there's a shit ton of 9.5s. There's a shit ton of PSA 10s. Versus with the Awakened Power, I would rather invest in the Awakened Power because I'm already at the top of the mountain. I own the creme de la creme. There's nothing really better than what I own, especially in that specific hobby. And Dragon Ball, Beckett 10 Victory Strike is literally the most valuable thing outside of placers. Placers are the only thing that can compete with it. But
pretty much,
yeah. But that's everything though. That's Pokemon. That's Yu-Gi-Oh. That's Dragon Ball. Placers are like their own category of things. So I think the Awakened Power is a much better investment in terms of opportunity. But again, if you're just buying things to be safe and you like Pokemon better, go for the Charizard. But if you like Dragon Ball and wanna, kind of feel more confident, I feel like investing in the Dragon Ball in the Awakened Power is a way better investment.
All right, I'll give you my take. So for me, I look at it as all of the different factors that make up a collectible. Art-wise, I agree. I think the Awakened Power art is much better than the Charizard. In terms of rarity, now this is one thing that I think is an interesting thing to compare. You know, keep in mind that although it's not confirmed, it is believed that the first edition set was printed. There's 10,000 copies. 10,000, I believe it was boxes or cases that was printed. But the idea is that there's essentially potentially 10,000 Charizards out there. So in terms of pure rarity, right, like how many were printed in existence, hands down, Tournament Power is going to be the one that was printed much less. I mean, no one knows for sure, but definitely nowhere near 10,000. It might not even be near 1,000, right? So you have something that in terms of just how many things of it were produced, you know, numbers-wise, again, Tournament Power is much, much lower than the original first edition base. I mean, it's obviously a very, very popular set and very, very hard to find today, but in general, it's you know, it's pretty well known that Wizards of the Coast actually printed quite a bit of it back in the 90s. So in terms of rarity, also again, you know, you have a lot less in existence of this card than you do the Charizard. And then another, you know, kind of like parallel to rarity is pull rate, right? Like the challenge and difficulty of pulling the Awakened Power is much, much harder because you're talking about something that was only one per case, whereas with the Charizard, I mean, there are stories of people that pulled like 3 in a box of the Charizard. So the challenge of pulling is another factor that I would say definitely is in the favor of the Awakened Power, because, you know, you're talking about something that is 1 out of 12 boxes potentially. So pull rate wise, also again, the Awakened Power. Now, the other interesting factor is the challenge of grading. That's one aspect that I would say is kind of similar. So it's hard to say which one wins that category. You have something like the Awakened Power that is hard to grade, not because of the card stock. Actually, Dragon Ball tends to have pretty good card stock, but the print quality of it was really poor. Like you had print lines, you had white specks, like you had all of these like flaws that added to the challenge of getting it graded. Whereas with the Pokemon cards, it actually wasn't really a print quality issue. Ironically, their card stock, especially the early vintage stuff, was not that great. So a lot of times, just because it was pack fresh, you would still have like dings on the edges or corners or other things just from taking it out of the pack. So there's also that challenge, and you know, obviously a lot of people can speculate whether there will ever be a black label of Precision Charizard, but there is that challenge of it too, right? So they also share similarities there, where they're both hard to pull. They're both hard to get in really good condition. So it's hard to say which one would actually win out in that category. I'd probably give that one a tie. But the other aspect though that I think is one that you should really think about is popularity, and buyer pool. And that's the one category that I think Pokemon, and specifically that card, the Charizard, by far trumps the Awakened Power.
So let me ask you this though. Do you think it's a matter of time? Because in all honesty...
Well, that's what I was going to get to, yeah. Is that like currently today, right, there's a lot more buyers out there. There's a lot more money out there being used to buy or go after the Charizard than there is the Awakened Power. Like if you look at the collecting side of the Awakened Power, it definitely like shot through the roof. I would say not in the immediate release of TOP because it was still kind of flying under the radar, but maybe towards the end of 2018, that kind of is when it started to gain a lot of traction, and you kind of saw this explosion of like cross collectors coming from other card games wanting to get the card either graded or buying it already graded. But then you kind of saw like a drop off of that, and you didn't really have that same consistent interest that you had in the beginning. So the desire for collecting that card today isn't what it used to be. Whereas with Charizard, you kind of have had, probably since maybe not exactly day one, but for a while now, it's always been that card that has always been popular to collect and has always had this huge buyer pool. So in terms of actual like interest in getting the card today, I would still say Charizard is going to be the one that wins. And so because of that, if you're only thinking financially, the safer bet, I would agree with Zeke, is that you would want to go after the Charizard, because that's the card that I don't see any, like in the foreseeable future, any sudden decline in popularity. And if there's no decline in popularity, that means that the demand will always be there. And so it's definitely something that probably over time, I would imagine would appreciate at a much higher rate than the Awakened Power. But you have to also think about it like this. The first 2 years, because it's not even a full 2 years, it's more like a year and a half now, that the Tournament Power has been out, like the percentage of growth on the Awakened Power is just unprecedented. I mean, we're talking about something that really, like you said, man, is like, it just went from like $70 raw to suddenly thousands of dollars graded. You just don't see that. It kind of like hyper grew, where most traditional iconic cards don't really go through that kind of insane growth in the beginning. So that probably also added to the, long-term, like unsustainable growth, because of the fact that it was just so sudden and just spiked. That's why you kind of saw it, settle down and even come down a little bit. Whereas with the Charizard, it kind of always had like a steady increase over time, right? Because it's obviously now like a 20-plus-year-old card, so it's kind of steadily over time grew that much. So I would say like part of it too is like there's a much higher risk, right? Like if you were to think about like a stock, like definitely Pokemon Vintage Charizard is going to be like your blue chip stock, right? Whereas with something like this Awakened Power, it's going to be something a lot more volatile, a lot more risky, a lot more younger, newer. It's kind of hard to tell what the future would be necessarily. So I think there are really interesting aspects of the Awakened Power that to me are better than the Charizard. But the one category that I think for a while it's going to be tough to beat is popularity. And that's the one that I think for now is probably going to be what drives better returns on the investment with the Charizard. But is that going to be the case forever? I don't know. Because there are the other factors that I mentioned that really do make it for an interesting case to argue for the Awakened Power. Namely, a lot less in existence and a lot harder to pull. And so I think there are those factors that could definitely help propel it. But it's also like a long-term thing, right? Because like, the Charizard, graded 10 wasn't $40,000 when it first came out. It took 20 years to get there. So if you're in the mindset of I want to buy this and hold it for 20 years, then yeah, I would imagine either option would give you decent returns. But if you had to like compare those returns, yeah, I would assume that the Charizard would probably get you better returns. For me personally, if I had to pick the two, I also side with Zeke. I would rather pick the Awakened Power because I love the factors that I mentioned. Those means a lot to me. The challenge of pulling it, a lot limited in existence. Even if the returns won't be as good as the Charizard, I'm okay with taking that risk because those other factors make up for it. Plus the fact that you're at the top of the top, right? A Beckett 10 Awakened Power is pretty much there. Like you have basically the near perfect specimen of that card. Whereas with the Charizard, it's a PSA 9. So to me, like, yeah, I probably personally would rather go for the 3 Beckett 10s if I was in that, situation. But probably doing that knowing that I'm not expecting the same kind of return as I would going after Charizard. But from a personal standpoint, an emotional standpoint, I feel like to me, I would be much happier owning 3 gold Awakened Powers and 1 PSA 9 Charizard first edition. So yeah, so that's my take on that. We're going a little over, but yeah, I mean, I guess that's pretty much it for me. If there's anything else, Zeke, we'll call it a day.
Yeah, no, we'll follow up and go into a little bit more about Dragon Ball next time and how Dragon Ball had a huge event this past weekend. So we'll kind of go into that next time. So.
All right. Well, thanks again for joining, and thank you guys for listening in. And until next time.
Yep. See you guys.